Hey folks, this is Rhykker with the Diablo 3 patch 2.5 Season 10 Barbarian build guide. Thanks to a 2.5 buff to the Seismic Slam skill, the Leapquake Barbarian has been indirectly buffed in Season 10. It'll now be basically in line with the top Barbarian builds, maybe just one Greater Rift level behind. It's a build that's great for Greater Rift pushing and can be modified for speed farming as well. In this video, we'll go over the skills and the gear that you need to rock this build. A Leapquake Barbarian combines Leap and Earthquake using the might of the Earth set. It's basically about jumping around as much as possible, causing earthquakes and avalanches everywhere that you land. For this build, you need to equip the full 6 pieces of the Might of the Earth set. The 2-piece bonus reduces the cooldown on Earthquake and Leap every time you spend Fury. The 4-piece bonus causes an Earthquake everywhere that you land with Leap, and it gives Leap a free rune. And the 6-piece bonus super buffs the damage of Earthquake, Leap, and Seismic Slam. Of course, I'm just mentioning the things that are relevant to this particular build. So we're going to want to combine this with some loot socks in our cube. This allows us to cast Leap 3 times in a row before the cooldown starts. Very important, and I wouldn't run this without the loot socks. For our weapon, we'll want the Blade of the Tribes. This gives us a big damage buff to our Earthquake damage. As a primary property, it can roll with up to 200% increased Earthquake damage, and Earthquake will be our main damage source. This item also makes our Threatening Shout cause an Earthquake. We'll also want a Girdle of Giants. That makes Seismic Slam buff Earthquake for 3 seconds after you use it. And you'll want to try as much as possible to get as close to 100% increased damage there as you can. And that's the basic gist of the items. For Greater Rift pushing, where you'll want more toughness, you'd want some Ancient Parthan Defenders. We'll be taking a rune on Leap that stuns enemies when we land, so this will pair perfectly well with our Ancient Parthans. But if you're going through easier content and don't need that added damage reduction, you can instead go with Bracers of Destruction. And if you're going through really fast speedruns and don't need that added damage, you can go with Nemesis Bracers. In our cube, we'll ideally want a Furnace. This build is good at area damage. It suffers a little bit against single target, high health enemies, so the Furnace really helps with that, but if you're doing speedruns, you can go with an Ingum. As for your cube jewelry slot, if you want to go full-on glass cannon, you'll want a Convention of Elements. But if you want a little bit more survivability, you can go with a Band of Might. Now on the test server, I saw this build clear a 94, and it was using a Convention of Elements. Your ideal amulet will be a Hellfire Amulet, squeeze in an additional passive, but you can also go with an Immunity Amulet or an Eye of Etlich. And your ideal rings will be Focus and Restraint for some mega damage buffs. Together, the dual set bonus of these rings more than doubles your damage. To trigger these, we'll be using Leap as our generator and Seismic Slam as our spender. For our gems, we'll want a Bane of the Trapped. Great damage buff will always be active. We'll want Esoteric Alteration. It's the best defensive gem, and we will need it. We're going to be in the thick of things. And then lastly, it's between the Bane of the Stricken and the Bane of the Powerful. You decide when to opt for one or the other based on how long it takes you to kill the Rift Guardian. As you'll see in this Rift, it took me a little bit too long to kill the Rift Guardian, so I should have been running a Bane of the Stricken. If you're doing easier content, you can go with a Bane of the Powerful. Now I'll give some suggestions about the stats that you want on the gear pieces, but this isn't very set in stone. Think of them more as guidelines. Area damage is something very important to this build, but so is cooldown reduction. The greater your cooldown reduction, the less time you'll be spending outside of leaping around. The items we'll present to you cleared a 94 Greater Rift, and they leaned more towards area damage versus cooldown reduction. So looking at the shoulders, we got Strength, Vitality, Area Damage, Cooldown Reduction. If you want, you can squeeze Earthquake damage in there somewhere. You can sub out either Vitality, Area Damage, or Cooldown. Again, if you want to squeeze in that Earthquake damage. For our Helm, Strength, Vitality, Crit Chance, and a diamond. For our amulet, we're going Fire, Crit, Crit. We're presenting here the fire variant of the Leapquake. There's also a physical variant, which is just a matter of which rune you take, and we'll go over the pros and cons of both when we get there. For our gloves, Strength, Crit, Crit, Area Damage. Instead of area damage, you may choose to get cooldown here. For our chest, Strength, Vitality, Earthquake damage, or you can go with a defensive stat like Life Percent. For our bracers, we'll want Elemental Damage, Strength, Vitality, Crit Chance. For our belt, strength, vitality, all resist, life percent. Getting maximum fury on your gear is also helpful, but it's definitely secondary. You could also substitute one of those primaries for life on fury spent. For our pants, strength, vitality, all resist. And for our boots, strength, vitality, all resist armor. For our rings, ideally you want crit, and then either area damage or cooldown reduction. For our weapon, we'll want strength, life per fury spent, increases earthquake damage. You want that as close to 200% as possible. When you're checking whether an item is an upgrade, be sure to bear in mind the increases earthquake damage. That is the main source of our damage. And then you can also go with +% damage. You can go with vitality if you want to be a bit more careful, or you could also go for area damage. Or if you want to be real crazy, you can swap out life per fury spent with area damage. But having that life per fury spent really helps with our sustain. Alright, on to the skills. We start with Seismic Slam Rumble, and this is the rune that has changed. Remember that with this set, you reduce the cooldown on Leap every time you spend Fury. Now previously, this build used Ancient Spear Boulder Toss as a Fury dump. Now, the Rumble rune on Seismic Slam has been given the same power. So what we've effectively done is freed up a slot on our skill bar for an additional skill, because we were actually using Seismic Slam with this build anyway in order to benefit from the Girdle of Giants. With this new modification to the Rumble rune, Seismic Slam and Ancient Spear Boulder Toss have been combined effectively into one skill. We want to be using Seismic Slam when both Leap and Threatening Shout are on cooldown, because they'll both benefit from the cooldown reduction. Next, we're taking Leap Death from Above. Next, we're taking Battle Rage Bloodshed. This is just a really strong offensive barbarian power. It's been a buff that just about every barbarian build has used since the dawn of time. Next, we're using Threatening Shout Falter as another damage buff, and it also serves to nerf enemies. Next, we'll take Earthquake Molten Fury. Molten Fury is the most damaging rune on Earthquake. In the past, we went with the physical rune Cave In, and that's because Cave In would pull enemies in. It would build density such that you're affecting more enemies. Well, ever since the density changes to Greater Rifts, that rune has been less impactful than Molten Fury, than just dealing more damage. We're sort of relying on the Rift itself to have that density. That said, feel free to use whichever variant you want. Just know that Molten Fury has the potential to do more damage and thus will be able to climb higher on the leaderboard. And that leaves us with the spot that we have freed up. And we're going to use Wrath of the Berserker Insanity for that. Now, as opposed to a Whirlwind build that seeks to have 100% uptime on Wrath of the Berserker, we're not trying to do that here. We're using Wrath of the Berserker solely situationally for the big fights when we need it. It's a huge damage buff. Onto our passives. We'll want Earthen Might. This is what will help us generate that fury. And then the next 3 passives, plus the one from our Hellfire Amulet that we'll pick, we're going to have Nerves of Steel. You ideally want that on your Hellfire Amulet. This is so that it's more versatile across whatever build you want to use. And then the 3 offensive passives you want are Ruthless. That's more damage to enemies that are below 30% health. That really helps with those big Rift Guardian fights. We'll want Brawler. We'll generally have a lot of enemies near us. We're going to be jumping into big packs of enemies, so we're going to increase our damage that way. And we'll want to maintain Rampage. This build is really good at killing trash, so what's important is to keep killing that trash. I don't do that so effectively in this video. I was hunting a little bit too much for a champion and elite packs, and so I was probably losing my Rampage buff. Now I want to finalize this video just by circling back to what we were talking about before about the Rift Guardian. You see, we also got unlucky. We're against Iskandiel, which is a pretty tough Rift Guardian for a melee character to deal with. I'm forced to fall back a lot. You know, you got those spinning dildos of doom, you've got his super annoying wave that knocks you back, slows you and all that, so I'm spending a lot of time not engaging him, but even when I'm engaging him, you can count how many times I'm leaping on him. Do a soft count of how many times I'm hitting him, and I feel that I would have benefited from a Bane of the Stricken, being able to build it up a little bit quicker. In the end, it wasn't too bad. I'm probably still okay with my Bane of the Powerful, but a Bane of the Stricken probably would have helped just a little more. And that covers all the skills, and that wraps up this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this build. If you're playing Barbarian, are you going to go for a Leapquake Barb? Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo guides.